This is Emily Blackshear Hall with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Wednesday, February 6, 2019, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, interviewing Tamara Lebak for the Deep Roots Oklahoma Authors Oral History Project. Tamara, you're a children's book author, a Unitarian Universalist minister, singer-songwriter, and CEO of Celebrating Difference. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
It's great to be here. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was actually born in Oakland, California, but my parents were both born here in Oklahoma, and they met actually when they were both in high school. And my dad was in the Navy when it was time for me to be born. I was planned very specifically so that I could be free with at the Naval Hospital. So I was conceived on leave, and my mom went out to go to Oakland to have me right before my dad was released from the Navy. So so they went from Yukon to Oakland, had me, and then came right back to Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. So you didn't spend much time in Oakland? Okay.
No, barely. I mean, only enough time to be healthy enough to drive back.
Oh, yeah. All right. So you grew up in Yukon?
I grew up in Oklahoma City. So they actually had a home in Oklahoma City. So I grew up in Oklahoma City and went to public school in Oklahoma City, Putnam Heights Elementary and Harding Middle School at the time, and then Northeast High School. And grew up all around the Oklahoma City area. My parents bought a house right after I was born, and we stayed in that house until I left the home to go to school.
Yeah. How would you describe the Oklahoma City of your childhood, and maybe how do you think it's changed?
You know, I mean, life has changed so much since then. I mean, I remember I was part of that generation that, you know, I was just put out on my banana bike seat and expected to be home before the street lamps came off. So I had this beautiful square mile of Pennsylvania Avenue and Classen Boulevard, and then like 23rd and 31st that I was able to go between all the time and could just basically have my own free reign. So I remember walking to school, all of my schools except high school and my fifth year center. I walked to elementary school and middle school, and I remember stopping for blackberries on the bushes on the way in the neighborhoods, and stopping at the Dunkin' Donuts across the big boulevard along the way. So it was a safe space for me. It was open and available to explore. I was surrounded by, we had many Vietnamese immigrant families who were moving in around the time and then going to the elementary school that I was a part of. And so also in my neighborhood were many Vietnamese children at the time that ended up being my friends over my lifetime. So,
right.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have any siblings?
I have a half brother. My parents divorced when I was about 8, and remarried. My dad remarried and had a son when I was 13. So he's more of a I was probably more of an aunt to him than a sister. We never lived together and had to fight over space or anything. So
yeah. So you said your father was in the Navy. What's his personality like? What kind of memories do you have?
Yeah. So my dad died in 2011. My dad was a creative, religious, spiritual, Buddhist Christian who we had a meditation space in our home growing up, and he was an avid reader of philosophy, very self-trained. The Navy was the only education he had. I was the first person in our family to go to college.
Oh, okay.
So, and the only reason why we were able to be socially mobile was because the military granted us the opportunity for my dad to get a VA loan for a house. So, and that kind of bumped us up. But my dad was trained as a respiratory therapist in the Navy and ended up doing that for most of his career while he was doing music on the side. And he was deeply, deeply spiritual and philosophical, but self-trained. Yeah.
And how about your mom?
My mom was a medical secretary most of her career. Was only high school educated, thought she was going to go to beauty school and have babies and raise a family, and and ended up instead having to go back to work when they got divorced, and so learned to be a medical secretary and did that most of her career.
Now, was she creative too? Or
Yeah,
were they
so
both musicians?
yeah, both my mom and my dad met in high school, and my dad was a guitar player, and they were both musicians. My mom was a singer, and they both were singer-songwriters. I remember, because I grew up with them in the house playing music all the time, and the band would be in our dining room became the rehearsal room regularly. But I remember her coming home from playing gigs at night, and I would see her in the morning, and she'd have bruises all along her thigh because she was banging her tambourine on her thigh the whole night. So yeah, I mean, I have really, really early memories of being 3 or 4 and standing up in a chair to a microphone singing "Ricky, Don't Lose That Number." And so yeah.
So did you always like singing, or did you play instruments?
I always loved singing, and I always loved anything creative that I could get my hands on. I will tell you that I have really vivid memories of, we lived across the street from the Frizzell Mansion, which was an early established mansion in Oklahoma City. And our house, I used to joke that it was probably the carriage house, but they had a huge mansion with a big porch, which was perfect for roller skating. And my best friend, that has been my best friend our whole lives since I was 3 and she was 4, we would roller skate and make up musical theater on rollers. Like, it was Xanadu before Xanadu ever knew what Xanadu was. And so we were writing story and plot lines and organizing things, and would really spend a lot of time outside doing that. So that co-creative process has always been a big piece of my understanding. And my childhood, I mean, from the beginning, it was about singing, and it was about designing creative experiences from early on.
How would you describe your personality as a kid?
I was a go-getter. There's a story that people tell about me that, like, long before I ever even knew I had a personality, there was I was 3 years old. I can't even believe this now that I have an 8-year-old and I watched her go through age 3. So we lived about 1.5 miles away from a Dunkin' Donuts that was, that my dad would wake up on Sunday morning and take me to the Dunkin' Donuts every Sunday morning. Well, one morning, because they played in a band late that night, they didn't get up, and it took quite a while. And, I think back at, like, wow, I could never get away with that. They slept way past any time, and I was just there to entertain myself. And I did, but then I also decided that I was hungry, and so I got my mom's purse, and I walked 1.5 miles with my mom's big crocheted 1970s purse all the way down to Dunkin' Donuts, got myself a donut and orange juice, got my dad a donut and coffee, and walked all the way back at 3, crossed a 4-lane street. And I tell that story in sermons a lot early on to help people understand that, like, there's something ingrained in me, even by that age, to think that, number one, I could just do that, I was just capable of, there's money and I'll just go do this. They can't do it, I'll go do it.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Yeah, that's a great story. What did you dream of becoming when you were a kid, or what were your dreams for the future?
Yeah, I had so many, but I think that, if I could have had all of the money and attention at an early age that I needed to really shape that, I probably would have been a musical theater director or something. I love music. I love creating experiences that involve music, and now I've at All Souls had a wonderful opportunity to be able to craft video and music and speaking parts and poetry and all of those things together. I think if I would have had early attention on that, I probably could have spent some more time on that. My parents were not very well off, and I know that I played the cello early on, and I wanted to play guitar, but my dad just had very little patience to be a teacher with me, and they couldn't afford private lessons. So I had the public school system orchestra program. So in 5th grade was introduced to the cello, loved the cello. When it came time for me to be able to have my own cello, we couldn't afford to have one, and so ended up not going that direction. But I do think that early experiences pointed to me doing music of some sort in some way. Yeah.
Were there teachers or maybe mentors early on that encouraged your creativity?
Yeah, I do think that this, I was very influenced by the public school system and had a lot of teachers that believed in my creative capacity, my writing especially. Early on, I started writing I remember I won a creative writing contest when I was in maybe the 6th grade. And it was about conformity is the hobgoblin of little minds. It was based on that quote, and I wrote a children's story. I haven't thought about this in so many years, but I wrote a short story based on it and won a creative writing contest. And so having that writing be acknowledged early on was really important, I think, in shaping that I had a voice and that I definitely was a go-getter, but to have a voice and have something to say to other people was surprising to me. So I think that planted some seeds early on too, that I could use my imagination and that it would be well received. Yeah. Yeah.
There any books in particular that you remember liking as a child that were influential?
As a kid, yeah, I probably should have done my homework before I came here on that. There was this, yes, but I don't have the name and I don't have a title.
We can
an author. It's fine. There's this beautiful book that I actually bought it again when my kiddo was born. But it's a story about a little boy whose parents are divorcing, and he has this like imaginary experience through a carnival that ends up being alien. Anyway, I loved the library, and my stepmother who was also a public school teacher and a high school public school teacher, every week would take me to the library. Our beginning together of me being able to see my dad was to go to the library and spend time. And I remember the first time she took me to the library and I got my library card and she said, you can take anything home. And I was like, anything? Like, how many can I take home? And she's like, as many as you want, but realize you'll only take what you're going to read. And I just came out with armfuls of books and just felt so empowered that that was even available to me. So I read like avidly, but I guess the period of time that I would say that was the most influential and when I really understood the teacher student dynamic was my French and English teacher out of high school, who introduced me to French existentialism and things like Rhinoceros by Ionesco, and we read The Stranger by Albert Camus, and we read Sartre's No Exit. And I ate them up about the idea that you could tell a narrative and also describe your philosophy. So something like Rhinoceros or No Exit, where you can create a drama that actually expresses philosophy, was something that was brand new to me at the time as a freshman in high school. And so I was just enamored with all of that. So I love when, and in crafting worship too, and as I started to do children's stories, I always wanted the children's story to be accessible to the kids, but just as profound to the adults who were listening. And that was really important to me. As a teacher, I felt like it was important, because I was an educator, to be able to teach to all of the layers of students, right? You have to have a differentiated approach and be able to meet people where they are. So inside even a short story, I wanted there to be accessibility for what you might say the A, the B, and the C student all at the same time, right? So that everybody gets multiple layers. And if you're really paying attention, you see how that children's story is directly connected to the hymn that was chose at the beginning and the sermon and the topic, and everything kind of was interwoven.
Yeah, so. And you mentioned earlier that you went to college, right? So tell me about that. What did you study? Where did you go?
So I actually I did I did an early acceptance program to OCU, and that was my first entree into college. My first course was in philosophy of religion, and I did concurrent enrollment while I was a senior in high school. Went to OCU. Then I was admitted into the Rotary International Exchange Program. I was an exchange student in Belgium for a year. Okay. So I went to school in Belgium, and then came back and went to the University of Oklahoma and tested out of a lot of French credit, and then ended up with a teacher certification K through 12 in French, but then also got a degree, a bachelor's in philosophy. So I was able to do that French philosophy combination that inspired me by my French teacher from ninth grade.
Wow. So tell me about Belgium. What was that experience like?
It was amazing. So I was 17 years old and basically got on a plane with one bag and got off on the other side and stayed with 3 different families who were incredible and all in some way connected to the Rotary Club. So it's a Rotary International program. I went to school there. I did basically my senior year over. It was a college preparatory school, but they were all preparing for the baccalaureate, which is a little different than how we do things here and way more intense. So they were studying. But one fun thing is that because they do language learning early on in Belgium, they put me in a Dutch class. So in Belgium, they have 3 national languages, German, Dutch, and French. And so they put me in a Dutch class with the 12-year-olds so that I would get to learn another language while I was there as well. So I had all these lists of like English to French to Dutch.
Yeah.
What I was doing.
So what did you think of the people?
It was, I'm a big believer that exchange programs are amazing ways to help connect, not just make the world smaller, but also, someone said to me as we were prepping to leave, this will be another, million plus people that you won't want to kill. And if it does anything but that's powerful. It did way more than that for me, but it's true. A piece of my heart is in Belgium. It was a significant piece of my growing up. And so I'm a beer fan. I'm a cheese fan. It definitely impacted my food and my wine
I was going
appreciation.
To ask about that next. What did you find?
The Rotary Club was still very male dominated at the time, and so I was the only woman who was in the space, and I was the only student who was in the space. But they took it upon themselves because they were so sad that I was going to have to drink California wine when I went back to America to invite me to their home. So monthly, a couple times a month, I would go to one of their houses and. They would have these elaborate meals, and I would have this wonderful wine. I mean, it was just amazing. So they spoiled me from the get-go.
Is there a particular meal that you remember having that really stands out?
There's nothing like a good Belgian endive wrapped in a beautiful ham done in a cream sauce with some cheese. There's nothing like that.
That sounds good.
And then I also remember walking from the bus to my school, and there was a carnival that happened about 3 times a year, and they would sell what they call crostillons, which are basically like or beignets. They would have these donuts basically that were fried with powdered sugar and cinnamon all over them. Amazing. And then also they had Belgian waffles, which are nothing like Belgian waffles here, but you get them like you would a crepe in Paris. So they're it's street food, but they would have cinnamon, and they would be crusted cinnamon on the outside. Just amazing.
So you come back, and you finished at OU, and then what did you do next?
And then I moved so unfortunately, because of the state of education in Oklahoma, I was one of those teachers that fled to another state and was lured into the Dallas area and got a job in Garland, Texas as an international baccalaureate French teacher. And I also ended up teaching theory of knowledge, which is a philosophy course. I coached swimming there and also ended up running their community action and service program, which is a part of the International Baccalaureate program where they have to track a certain amount of community service hours in order to go for full diploma. So
how long did you teach?
I taught for 7 years, and it was a wonderful experience. I actually thought that I would die at the chalkboard, and it really was a chalkboard at the time. It wasn't even a dry erase. I loved teaching school, loved teaching theory of knowledge, especially really loved teaching French, and excelled at it in enough of a way that they sent me to Wales to train other teachers. So I got to go to Wales and train as a theory of knowledge international grader and as a French teacher to teach other teachers how to do that work, which was a lot of fun. But there was a moment at the end of that time when I felt a real call to ministry, and it actually happened right after 9/11 happened. So during 9/11, I was teaching in Garland. We had some students who had some parents who were actually in New York City at the time, and that moment shifted a lot for me. I was teaching very privileged kids, and they were amazing, but there was a point where I felt like somebody else could probably do this, and I'm feeling pulled to go do something else. So I had heard an inkling of a call to ministry in my mind when I was sitting in Dallas at a large Unitarian Universalist church and watched a female minister, after seeing her preach several times, realized that she was really a woman. She was talking about taking her son at the time to seminary with her, and it like struck me that she was a woman with a family. And I thought, wow, I could actually do this. That's amazing. And I kind of put it off, but I've been looking at the book list I'd have to read and the schooling I'd have to have, and then 9/11 hit. And I thought, you know what, I'll never know unless I just apply. And I got the brochure. I wanted to go to a Unitarian Universalist seminary because I didn't grow up UU. And I looked at the brochure, and all of the current students had their previous schools that they graduated from, and it was like Carnegie Mellon and the university. I mean, like, it was all of these non-state schools. and Ivy League schools. And I thought, there's just no way they're going to take my little self from the University of Oklahoma. And I applied and got the interview and was told even by the end of the interview that I had a position in the class if I wanted it. And so it was really powerful. So it was and an acknowledgement to me to not let our dreams be stifled by preconceived notions about coming from Oklahoma.
Right. So what was school? What was seminary like?
Seminary was great. Seminary was an opportunity to dig deep into my own theological values and my own lens of social justice and how I wanted to be a change agent in the world. But I got to attend classes at the University of Chicago, which was a dream come true because I couldn't do that as an undergrad, so that was great. And then, seminary was really training me to be more of a seminary professor. It wasn't really teaching me how to be a change agent. And so I wanted to learn how to be a change agent. And so while I was in school, I went to the University of Chicago Graham School and got a nonprofit management certification. And then I also, we have two components as part of the ministry dynamic where you also have to do something called CPE, which is clinical pastoral education. So they had opened up again a unit at a prison. And so I did an extended unit as a prison as a chaplain. And I was my first day there was the day that Governor George Ryan wiped out death row and put them all back in general population. And so I was at a maximum security men's prison on the week that had started again, which was very powerful to be a part of that process. Then I did a chaplaincy at a hospital, the University of Chicago Hospitals. And then before I graduated, I still felt like I wasn't figuring out, how do I lead an organization? How do I really do this? And I found the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, which is an amazing program that I believe contributes significantly to how I see the world and how I see writing and how I see music, because it really does talk about how everything that we bring, all of the systems that we're a part of, we bring into every moment. And so there's a way in which, and it also suggests that the solution to the thing that we need the most is present right now. We just have to find it. And Gestalt is a philosophy. It's also an organizational development tool that I use in order to do the consulting that I do today. But it also helped me very much as a minister. And then I was making a lot of really wonderful friendships at the time and was doing some consulting. My last year, I served a church in Cleveland, Ohio, which was my internship, but then my internship supervisors went on sabbatical, and so I was able to be the sabbatical minister while they were away for 6 months. And then I was doing consulting at the same time. So spending my weekends and various times traveling around the country and consulting with the consultants that I had met in the other program and loved it. And at the same time, a position opened up at All Souls here in Tulsa. And I didn't know that All Souls in Tulsa was the largest Unitarian Universalist church in the country until probably my second or third year of seminary. So I had only been introduced to Unitarian Universalism in Dallas. Had never been to the UU church in Oklahoma City, had never been here in Tulsa. So when the position opened up for the largest church in the country, I thought, well, yeah, and it can get me back to Oklahoma, absolutely. I actually applied to two different churches at the same time. One was in Tennessee. There was another in New Hampshire, and then the one in Tulsa, and was really having to grapple at the time, myself and my partner at the time, about how did we want to do our work in the world? Did we want to go to a place where we knew we would, because I'm gay, where we could already be accepted, at a place like a large city in New Hampshire, or did we want to go back to the place where we were both from in the South and stake our claim there? And we both agreed that that's what we wanted to do, was essentially come back. So I tried to either get that Tennessee or the Tulsa position and really focused my attention there and turned away from the coasts to get back to Oklahoma.
So what was it like in Tulsa starting out, and how do you feel like you were received and the work that you were doing to connect with people?
I think, All Souls is so gracious, and the people there were so gracious. I was the first openly gay minister that they'd ever called. It had barely a ripple effect when it happened, when I was called. The amazing thing was that Bishop Pearson's church before it took 2 years to get hired into that position and called. So I was an assistant before I was an associate. And then after I was called in May, Bishop Pearson's church, which is a predominantly African-American, was a mixed race Pentecostal church, was kind of floating around the city, 300 of them that were left after he had his big change of faith of no longer believing in hell. He went from 3,000 members to 300, and they were kind of moving around the city trying to figure out where they were going to be. And they landed in a couple of different places, and then they were trying to rebuild. And All Souls only had one service on Sunday during the summer. So Marlon Levenhard gave them the space to be able to shift into that 11:30 slot so that he could hopefully build his church and then go elsewhere. But what happened was he ended up staying. So I was part of this amazing mixture and blend of cultures that was happening at All Souls at that time. And it was extraordinary because it was like a dream come true. I never expected to see a church that was that diverse in Tulsa. The church that I was called to before they joined us was predominantly white with maybe 1% people of color. And all of a sudden we went from having that 1% to having 150 people of color in our congregation nearly overnight. And it was a dream come true for me because I'm a big believer that churches should reflect the diversity of all the people. Yeah, right. We shouldn't be the most segregated on Sunday morning. So definitely it was amazing to be accepted in that space. But we had to navigate it pretty interestingly because I had grown up going to different churches because my parents weren't very church-going people. My dad was very spiritual. My mom was kind of a Pat Robertson watching, but neither one of them went to church on Sunday. Okay. Because they were in bands on Saturday night, right? So they
sleep it in.
Right. So on Sunday morning, I would go to church with all of my friends. I wouldn't go, and so I ended up going to multiple different churches, but I got to experience African American Pentecostal church firsthand. And my co-pastor, senior minister, then Marlon Levenhard, grew up Unitarian Universalist, so he'd never had that culturation. And so I was able to help do some translating in times when it maybe wasn't as obvious. And so that was fun to be able to talk about things like speaking in tongues not being crazy. And is there a way to be able to, intellectually think about that as a meditation, as a way to get our own brains out of the way, to be able to connect to creativity and spirit. I mean, and got to do some really beautiful translating there. So that's from one side to the other. But the church that Bishop Pearson came from initially was very homophobic. And so to have someone like me being their mediator was complicated.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
It's just complicated. So, I was the preacher, they called me the singing chaplain when I was a chaplain because I would sing at people's bedsides when there was no response to give me something to do. I would sing old hymns. But even at All Souls, I would sing in those spaces, right? So it was a dream come true to have a praise band leading me up into that space. That's just not the culture of Unitarian Universalism traditionally. And so to have someone like David Smith and a choir singing praise music that I could then step into a pulpit and sing along with them and then preach was just amazing. It was really an incredible time.
And during this time, you're writing stories for kids. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could start with Cowboy God.
Yeah. So Cowboy God was a collaboration between myself and my ex-wife. So Jill Webb, who is actually a lawyer who works at the ACLU, she and I were together for about 17 years. We met while I was teaching in Garland, and she had this dream. More like a vision. It was more like a vision that happened in meditation. And I had always wanted to write it down because I felt like it really articulated some theology that I had had for a long time. And I think made some space for kids to not have to feel like God needed to be interpreted in one way or another. And my whole life in my church experience, I've always felt a deep and profound connection to God, and I've always felt very spiritual. And I feel like over time, I call it my 3-strike story. 3 different churches got it all really wrong. Yeah. First, it was the African American Baptist church who told me I couldn't join because they asked me where my parents were. I was obviously the only white kid there, and it was like, no, go find another one. So I found a white Baptist church, and then that didn't work because I asked too many questions and danced down the hallway after they baptized me. And We couldn't dance there. And then I went to the Methodist church, and it was a very conservative Methodist church that I was trying to grapple with the diversity that was occurring in my classes at school. And I said, I have, my Jewish friend is going to go to hell. And he said, yes, unless they convert. And I said, I don't believe in that God. That God is too small for me, basically. So there's a way in which, even though I didn't have the language at the time, I was clear that I was grappling with a man-made problem, not a God problem. And so I'd always had a connection spiritually. So to have a story like Cowboy God that says, you know what, God is going to meet us. If we have the capacity to meet people where they are in this life, certainly God can meet us where we are. And that there's not children in Africa who are all going to purgatory because they weren't introduced to the correct version of a religious narrative. And so this story is about a little girl who's lonely, who's feeling really lonely. And she asks different people how to ease her loneliness, to find her grandmother, who basically asks her to sit still and listen carefully. And then she has this vision of walking through a hallway and seeing many, many doors, and then going out into the outside world and sitting on a park bench where she sees her reflection, and then feeling something coming towards her that she knows is God, but as it approaches, it changes form. And first it looks like Jesus, and she says, I'm not a Christian. And then it looks like Buddha, and she says, but I'm not a Buddhist. And then eventually, and I, in the children's book, envision her in a plaid shirt with denim jeans and cowboy boots, just being kind of a tomboy little girl. Mm-hmm. And eventually it's a man that is dressed identically to her. Mm-hmm. And so she's able to sit down next to this cowboy version of God, and he just laughs and makes her feel completely at peace and knows that everything's okay. And so I'm just in a space where I just believe that the image, first of all, we project our own image on God. I mean, I'm a really big believer that that's true. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the case, how can we have a story teaching projection to kids is not going to happen necessarily. Right. So how do we create a story where whatever they're coming up with about God is okay? So if God is if God is Santa Claus, we'll deal with that later, but it's okay right now, right? Yeah. It's okay. Or if God is, their imaginary friend, that's okay too. And so what does it look like right now, and how do we encourage that creativity and also not be dismissive about their religious feelings, which I really believe kids have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you read that to kids in your congregation or share it?
I've read it to my own kiddos and kiddos in our lives. That's not one of the ones that it was published in the newsletter and used in chapel. So that's true.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering how it was used.
So used for children's chapel several times. And then All Souls works on a theme-based liturgical calendar. And so it was put in with some of the materials for the congregation to use as they're grappling with the concept of God, and the ways that different religions view God. So it was a children's story that was used for that.
Yeah, it really incorporates a lot of different kind of heavy ideas. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And Rose Goes to Church. Now that's another one that kind of deals with something rather heavy. Could you tell me about Flower Communion? Yeah, so Flower Communion
was started by Chapek. It's a Unitarian tradition, and I wrote that children's story for our Flower Communion Sunday. And Flower Communion Sunday is often connected in Unitarian Universalist churches to Mother's Day, and that story is about so on Flower Communion, we all are encouraged to bring flowers from our own garden to create a flower bouquet that then at the end of the service, you take a different flower home with you. That's how it's considered communion, essentially. We bring something and then we take something different home. And the idea is that it celebrates the diversity of all of the members of the congregation that are there present and allows you to take some of that diversity with you when you go home. The history, which you may have to edit out, because I don't have it all in my brain about Chapek and what happened in that story, but I think it's really important to connect it back to what is a very heavy story about what was going on in Transylvania at the time.
Right. So he was sent to Dachau.
Dachau, yeah.
Died for his
beliefs. Yeah,
basically.
essentially. Right. Yeah.
All right. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about Council Oak. Council Oak Leaves and that story and what you hope to accomplish with that.
That story started out as a back to school blessing story that I wrote for the congregation. So they started to do a back to school blessing for all of the kids, the kindergartners or the preschoolers who were going to school for the very first time. And then also just evolved into anybody and everybody who was starting a new school year in that kind of August, September lens. And it ended up, it's one of those times where I feel like it started out to be a story about a leaf taking its journey, a journey of its own, like leaving your family and going out and doing your life, and ended up being pretty. I mean, I get weepy about thinking about taking your entire journey from your birth to death instead of just that little journey of your schooling, years. And so I wrote that not initially for this Council Oak experience. It's really interesting to me that I wrote it with the idea of the Council Oak tree in mind because of Tulsa. I'm always interested in grounding my stories in the ground in which those stories have come out of. So that's really important to me. And it's important in the cultural competence work that I do too. We have to know who we are and be transparent about who we are and pay attention to the ground that we've been planted in, right? Before we're going to even be able to be more diverse or accessible to welcoming in people who are new to our space. So I'm a big believer that we have to do that work. So I was constantly looking for ways to connect the things that I was doing to Tulsa. And I knew I had learned about the Council Oak tree. I was in Leadership Tulsa, class 40, and was taken around to the Council Oak tree. And I think that might have been right around that same time. And so I included the Council Oak tree in that leaf story. Well, then, interestingly, when you fast forward, so that was in 2000, I think I wrote that story in 2007. And then you fast forward to just this past year, so 2018, and I have been invited to help facilitate a group of community leaders in helping to support the superintendent to know what school names she might want to change. And I led a group of community members called the Community Advisory Council, leaders from all over, business leaders, education leaders, religious leaders, corporate leaders, through a process to help them make recommendations to the superintendent to decide which building names did no longer fit in with the values of Tulsa Public Schools. And so there were 5 names lifted up, and one of them was Robert E. Lee. And so we lifted up all 5 of those names, and then I was kind of finished with my process and had helped them to suggest a process for them in each school name to go change. Well, 4 of the names changed super quickly and very easily, except for Robert E. Lee. So they tried a process a couple of times and failed to be able to successfully change the name and invited me back in. So I helped to support them to change the name to what was Council Oak. It's Council Oak now. But they came up with 5 beautiful names. They did a community charrette. They went through a whole very engaged process to make this happen. But what was fascinating is I had completely forgotten about that Council Oak story until after I had a connection with the chief of the Cherokees. And so I had connected the principal to the chief of the Cherokees, and I went with her to meet with them to see, well, what could this relationship look like going forward? And I was just kind of the mediator of like connecting these 2 people. And as I'm sitting there, I thought, I've written a story about Council Oak. And I absolutely had forgotten about it. And I went and dug it up and reread it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this story is so perfect for an elementary school. So I'm hoping to get it published. I've got some feelers out to try and get it illustrated I would like a First Nation person to actually do that work so that it's a collaboration. I have some Perdido Bay Native American history, but it's so loosely affiliated that it feels to me important to be able to honor and respect the tradition of Council Oak, to have ideally a Cherokee, a Creek person, Creek Nation person help us do that work. So that's what I'd be interested in.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, I'm thinking about these stories and maybe thinking how kids might approach them or interpret them. What words of encouragement would you give to a child that wants to have a spiritual connection or belief system, but feels like they can't fit in or like they're not being accepted? So the examples you gave, going to, this church or that church and being told, no, you can't come here because blah, blah, blah reason.
It's funny. I need to write something about that because I haven't really fleshed out all of my ideas. I feel like I made it through that by the grace of God. I mean, I really do. I think that part of it is trusting the experiences that you have outside of the organizations, trusting those feelings of connection to something larger than you. Religious experience and affectual experience is real, and prayer changes us, and meditation changes us. We can argue and debate about whether it changes other things, but it definitely changes us. And so, I'm a big believer that we have to trust that if you are having feelings that there's something larger than you in this world, and that you are part of something larger than you, to grab hold of that. And then, of course, I preach that every child is a child of God, and that everyone has been given a gift, ideally that they'll deliver to the world. Not everyone does, but everyone's been given a gift. And the question is, how do we use, and that gift changes over time. So how do we use that gift that we've been given to incorporate all of the parts of ourselves to be able to then deliver a gift to the world? So maybe we thought, maybe our early gift was something, and then it's changed and molded because we've had a terrible experience or a tragic experience. Well, then the question becomes, how do you blend that initial gift that you were given and the integration of that negative experience or traumatic experience to be able to heal the world, to heal yourself and the world? Like, I just really believe that we've all been given a gift to be able to pass on, and that we're all children of God, every one of us, in our diversity.
So in addition to being an author and writer, you're also a singer and songwriter. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the songwriting process.
Yeah. It's funny because my sermon writing process and my songwriting process are very similar. And when I first got launched into the current project that I'm on, which is the Psalms Project, I was trying to find a place for my ministry. When I left the church full-time and started doing consulting and coaching full-time, I kept running into people, because also is such a large church, I kept running into people who were like, what are you doing now? It's like, well, I'm doing consulting. It's like, yeah, but what about your ministry? Well, that is my ministry. Our ministry is doing consulting and coaching, but I get it. There's this ministry piece that I'm not showing up with. And so how do I make space for that? And so I took my sermon writing discipline of over 8 years of writing a sermon a week in some way, shape, or form, and turning that to my songwriting skills. And my sermon writing is a mess. Don't ever follow this.
Okay.
My sermon writing is about picking a title 2 weeks in advance. This is what sermon writing looks like. I pick a title 2 weeks in advance, and I spend maybe an hour paying attention to what are some kind of major stories that come to mind, first of all, that might be good examples. What are the scripture that might be grounded in this? And then I basically just let my life unfold and pay attention through that lens and trust that what I need will show up by 4:00 in the morning the Sunday of. This is really not a way to lead your life. I mean, it's not. And then Sunday morning, the day of, I get up and write from beginning to end, from 4 a.m. until about 8 a.m. Shower, get to church, I'm done there by 9. I mean, that's what I do. It's one draft and it's there. Now, I will also say that I manipulate and massage it over the course of doing it, but it's very
that pre-writing
is all happening in my brain. And then sermon songwriting is actually it's kind of similar. The first volume of Psalms I did very similar to that, where I opened a psalm on a Sunday, I read the psalm, I let it sit. I kind of gathered ideas in my phone throughout the course of the week, and then I sit down on a Saturday and just go, okay, it's due tomorrow. How do I do this, right? And on Saturday, I would just crank it out, right? And then hold myself accountable to having a finished product by Sunday. Because we started to travel with these psalms and songs, my process has shifted considerably. So I would say for the second batch of 25, this 26 through 50, I jot down a lot of notes, and sometimes I've gotten stuck in melody, and sometimes I get stuck in theme. But my melody sticking is because I've outgrown even my own capacity to play the guitar and piano. So I actually need to collaborate some more. So I've got an appointment Friday. So this is what songwriting looks like right now.
Yeah.
I have drafts of theme on 2 different psalms. I have ideas of melody that I've sung into my phone, and I've sent them to a pianist friend of mine who lives in New York, and we're going to meet on Zoom and with our pianos and guitar and try and crank it out together over 8 hours and get a couple of them done and kind of finished up. So, but I'm a believer that the melodies need to be simple and memorable. One of the great benefits of having these psalms sung around my house over the past 2 years is that my daughter is learning scripture. And the Psalms are really at the intersection of Judaism and Christianity, Islam, and really Western poetic lament. And so being able to fill her head and heart with those words and through my theology has just been a complete blessing. So a song like Psalm 23, where I use a lot of the actual words in the psalm, but most of the psalms I'm sitting with it, being inspired by it, and then writing my own thing. I'm not just trying to set it to music. And then because the psalms are so repetitive and I'm doing them in order, if the theme has been covered in one of my songs, I will not pick it up again, likely, because it'll sound too much like the previous one. So I'm looking for the nuance of what's new in this psalm that wasn't mentioned in the previous, however many there are, which allows me to do some process of elimination, because there is a lot of similar themes. I will please ensnare my enemy with his own trap is pretty common. I think there's a lot of common themes across the board.
Yeah, and that revision process, kind of the parallels it has to writing, I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
What sorts of memorable experiences have you had as a musician, a performer?
Gosh, so many. Well, that first time I performed that I led worship at All Souls with the praise band was amazing. Also, the first time when I was applying for the position at All Souls, I got to preach at the church in Oklahoma City, which I'd never even been to. So I was at the church in Oklahoma City, and all of my worlds kind of collided together. Like people didn't know that I'd gone to seminary. So all of my high school friends, my lifelong friends, everybody kind of came to this church and heard me speak. And that was amazing. Yeah. I would say too, I just had a CD release party for the Psalms Project. That's been incredible. We've been able to travel the country with this project, and I've just been so blessed to have had the opportunity to put it in front of multiple people. But there's one thing that stands out to me that makes me think about, when people come up to me after we've done the Psalms Project and they want to go back to the text. They want to see what I've done with it. They want to see what themes I picked up. What did I focus on? What did I shift? There's something about reconnecting them to the text that I feel like I'm doing with the song. So the song is catchy and it's interesting and they get to see my lens on it. But I think just because I've not done it literally, what I'm saying by demonstration is go engage this yourself. Go look at the text and see what stands out to you and what piece matters to you. This is just me and my lens. What's you and your lens? What does that look like? So that's, I think, just by demonstration, that's when people are touched by the Psalms and they come back and tell me that they're touched by it. That's very moving to me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. You have a song called Dear Oklahoma.
I do. Yeah.
Could you tell me about that song?
Yeah, Dear Oklahoma. So Louise Branscombe is a Grammy award-winning singer-songwriter who hosts a songwriting retreat called the Woodsong Camp Retreat. And the very first time I ever went to that, I didn't write anything the whole time. So I've only been one time, and I've always wanted to go to a songwriting camp. I've always thought that would be fun. And I went to one, and I had a great time playing wonderful music and got lots of interesting little snippets of ideas. But I didn't really write a song while I was there, and the idea was to completely write the song. So I ended up writing that song beginning to end in the airport on the way out. Yes,
wow.
So just so interesting. But the concept is basically I wanted to write a love letter to Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma, and I think that when I think about Tulsa, everybody keeps telling me about Tulsa transplants and how all these people that are in Tulsa go somewhere else, but then they end up coming back. Why it is they keep coming back?
Yeah.
Well, I feel the same way about Oklahoma, and essentially that's my journey, right? Is that I spent the majority of my growing up years here, and then I left, and then now I've circled the globe and come back, right? So, and I just feel like if we would all invest in coming back. I know a lot of people leave and don't manage it, but I really think that if we all came back and put our hearts and minds from what we've learned back into the state and really fertilize the soil with that, it could be amazing. So this song is about, it was about Oklahoma trying to legalize gay marriage. And I really wrote it as kind of an anthem for that of, I couldn't understand how I could love a state so much and I could have this feeling that it didn't love me back.
Yeah.
And I had that feeling for the first time when I was in Ohio, actually, and they were voting on the referendum, the same thing. And I was a minister there and very present and very out and really thought that they were going to be able to pass it. And then when it didn't pass, I had this feeling of betrayal. Like, I thought I knew you, Ohio. And now I just don't. I feel like I'm driving around my car and I feel like the people next to me hate who I am and hate who I love and think I'm disgusting and whatever. So that piece, kind of that experience put on Oklahoma when I was here, no, I know this state and I love this state and I have similar values as people in this state. And we don't need to be haters, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't have to hate each other. We can actually use the richness of this soil to grow some amazing things and to not be in competition about what's right and what's wrong. It doesn't need to be that way. And so it feels, especially reconnecting in that song to my religious roots and saying, it's not just, it's my Oklahoma roots, but it's my religious roots, and I'm gay, and it's okay, right? So really trying to lift up this intersectionality. I mean, I think what you're going to see in the themes of all the stuff I do is always some space of intersectionality. Where am I pulling two worlds together? I am fascinated about the edges where worlds touch, because to me, where two or more are gathered, there's something miraculous that occurs. And if you don't have two, then it doesn't really happen, right? So I'm looking at this intersectionality between religion and Oklahoma, and what does that do, and what kind of, what is there something I want to say in that fertile ground? I would say with the Psalms, it's kind of similar, right? I'm looking at the space where the Psalms, which are already an intersection themselves, where do they connect with my theology and who I am as a deliverer of that message? So they're not, gay songs. It's just me. It's an LGBTQ person doing them, right? But in that, for some reason, that sets some fire under some people. So, but the song itself is just a story about me, how I met my wife at the time, the fact that we had to leave Oklahoma to go get married. We had to go to New York to get married because we couldn't get married at the time in Oklahoma. And then, and it's like, you're asking me to leave my home state, this state that I love, to go marry the person that I love. And then to come back here and work these fields. I'm working these fields again. I believe in the same ground that I'm tilling the same ground that you're tilling, right? So can we work together to not make this so hard on certain people?
Do you feel like you're seeing change on that front
through
your work here?
I don't know about through my work. I mean, I feel like I'm just one voice.
In general.
But in general, it's changed so much. I was just meeting with an educator today, and we were talking about the difference. I was the first openly gay teacher at the school that I served at Garland, and came out after I was accepted to seminary. I came out to kind of forge a way for those after me. And now there's LGBTQ, and ally groups in every school in Dallas. And that was just very rare at the time. And that was just that was 2001 when I left. It was not that long ago.
Right.
I mean, it's long ago now, but we've made
Totally.
a lot of progress from 2001 to now. Is another generation of kids through school.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got this, I feel like there's a lot more fluidity and acceptance around sexual orientation and gender fluidity and even religious preference. I mean, I feel like there's the lines are not as rigid with this generation. And I know some people might think that that's a problem. I don't see that as a problem. I actually see that as an expanding our circle and not as a perforation of boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message to talk about in this oral history interview as well, that in Oklahoma, there are different views. It's not just the views that we may hear kind of in the national setting, and I think it's important to point out that there's more to this place than maybe how we're perceived nationally or internationally, if people even know where we are.
Well, when I was an exchange student, one of the things that's really interesting, you find out how you're perceived when you get out of your own space, right? You can't be a prophet in your own town. When I was an exchange student, the other Americans who were also exchange students with me in Belgium asked me questions like, now this was 1990, right? But they asked me questions like, do you ride a horse to school? Do you live in a teepee? Do they have, there was just, there's no, if you haven't been here, you don't have the concept. Now, I think that's shifted a lot since we've had the internet, and I didn't even have a cell phone when I was an exchange student, right? Yeah. So the world has changed considerably. But at the same time, I think that we are being called not to be monocultural, where we're not being asked to all be the same, right? In America, we've got to get to a space where we can lift up our individual differences and celebrate them, hence the work that I'm doing in diversity and inclusion work, right? And there is a rich quilt fabric of beliefs and philosophies and loves in this state. Where we do ourselves a disservice is when we paint a blanket, we paint ourselves or whitewash that into assuming that, because we're Oklahomans, we're all like this. Well, that's just not true. So I'm always encouraging people to dig up the diversity in the spaces where they think that they've got it all figured out about whoever those people are, to really check ourselves and think, well, maybe not. I mean, if you have a group of Christians, even a group of Methodists, even a group of, they are going to disagree. In that group of 30, they're going to disagree. Well, in the group of a church, then you can't just paint all Methodists as one thing either. Well, same thing with Unitarian Universalists, same thing. Any label, no label purely defines an individual, right? And no individual completely represents a category of which they are a part. So, yeah.
Right. So how do you find time to write?
I don't. I do it in the morning. I will tell you my favorite space, and I know that some of it is that I put pressure on myself to get finished, right? So that it gets finished. Yeah. But I love that hour, that 4 o'clock to 7:30 or 8 o'clock hour is the sweetest time for me. It is a time when it feels like the rest of the world is asleep. My phone won't go off. My emails don't come in for the most part. I mean, I'm not, my daughter's asleep, my spouse is asleep. It's all, everything is quiet in the world. And it can just be me and my dog and my computer and my cup of coffee. And, that's it. I'm not somebody who likes to write in a coffee shop or in a public space. Or I really like to be zoned in and
have that solitude.
And I like to go back and forth sometimes between writing on the computer and writing music. So my office contains my music and my writing space. Yeah.
Do you keep a journal? I haven't asked that. Yeah. Or do you keep notes on your phone? How do you keep yourself organized?
I used to be really good about keeping a journal, but I will tell you, even the journal didn't organize me in a way that I wish it could. Like, I wish I did that just more to just vomit on the page, right? To get that all out. But I have an organizing thing now that I really love that's called GQs. And it lets me categorize things by priority, and then I can sort them. So I'm using two actual digital things now. One is called GQs, and the other one is called Trello. And a Trello board is a project management tool that I used in the corporate world, but I love it because it's basically, the old school version how they used to teach us to write academic papers where the index card method. It's basically that, but it's digital. And so you can pick them up and move them around, and you can have categories and sort them and tag them and subject tag them. And so I use a lot of Trello boards now, and I use GQs quite a bit to keep my ideas organized. I have a pending list in my phone of sermon writing ideas, songwriting ideas, short story ideas, children's story ideas, and not books. I've got 3 books in me that I know need to come out. But it's just about prioritizing everything and trying to figure out. I have to make money since I'm working for myself right now too. I have to make money too. Yeah. So and I'm back in school. I'm in a doctoral program at Phillips Theological Seminary right now with the Psalms Project as the focus, and I'm writing about how that is a cultural intervention actually into both Christianity and into my own denomination. And so it's an intervention into my own denomination because when Unitarian Universalism came together in 1961, Unitarianism was kind of the winner of that history. They were the institutional winner. They had more money, they had more resources, and so they kind of won out culturally in that unification. And I'm more of a universalist, and it did not win out in that space. And so right now there's a lifting up of more universalist tradition and universalist Christianity in our movement. So the Psalms Project actually is an intervention to my own denomination to raise that theist universalist history again and kind of be a new reflection of that tradition. And then in Christianity, just because I'm a LGBTQ worship leader grounded in the scripture, that's already an intervention culturally. So I'm writing a lot for school right now, and that's got some of my priority. And then of course I'm writing to be able to lead workshops. So because I do consulting and coaching, I also do couples workshops and I do individual trainings. And so I write for those trainings and write for those workshops. And so that takes up some time too. So finding time to do my creative endeavors is a little more of a push right now.
More of a challenge.
A challenge.
Yeah. So what's the best writing advice or life advice?
Writing advice.
Yeah.
Writing advice for me, actually, and I just brought this up because I had a paper deadline. It's don't get it right, get it written.
Yeah.
And my perfectionism comes in. I have to have a deadline, and I have to it has to be good enough to submit at some point, right? So part of it is just not letting your perfectionism get in the way of being able to do a lot of things. Right? I mean, that's the thing. If you have to do it perfectly, then you probably won't do anything or very few things. And I have had such a blessing of a life of being able to, have a CD release party. This is my second actually. And to have traveled the world and to speak a language and I've just had such to be first at things, it's just amazing. And it's because I was willing to do it imperfectly and know that I would be held in that space. Right. So, or trust that I would be resilient and learn from it. And so I really think that when we start to embrace a culture of making mistakes and, if the life advice, which I think is writing advice too, is don't take yourself so seriously. I think that when we take ourselves so seriously and let those faults or those mistakes become identifiers of who we are, or just wound us, it can keep us from the next great thing that could incorporate or integrate that learning into the next thing, So I'm a big believer that mistakes give us our uniqueness. It's like those bowls, the bowls with the cracks in them. I can't remember that. I think it's Japanese, where they fill them with copper, and basically that's what creates this stunning piece of art is how it broke.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I know, in a very short period of time. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tamara.
It's my pleasure.